Mayor Nutter, thank you so much for the opportunity to speak to this compelling issue. Tom, thank you so much. And to the leadership, I want to commend you for stepping forward to talk about an issue that is perhaps one of the toughest issues that we can talk about in America. Hard truths fall painfully on ears that don't want to hear and eyes that don't want to see. America is drunk on violence, and we're drowning in sorrow as we mourn the deaths and the consequences from it. So today I want to talk to you specifically about murder and the huge challenge it represents to our future. Indeed, as the mayors, we are the tip of the spear in this fight against murders. We are the generals in the war to secure peace and preserve freedom in our homeland, to form that more perfect union envisioned by our forebears, to establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, and in this case, in fact, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and yes, secure the blessings of liberty for ourselves and for our posterity. That is why my dear friend and my brother, Mayor Mike Nutter, has brought us together, he and I like ebony and ivory, on this issue through this city's united initiative and all of our funders. As Mayor Goodman said just yesterday, we are the ones with the boots on the ground and our hands are in the soil. As mayors, we are at the scene after every murder. We get the call when the police officer gets shot. We pray with the families. We mourn and march in vigils lit by candlelight, hoping to pierce the darkness and find another way. And with eyes wide open, we are the ones that are forced to see in full flesh and blood the deadly consequences of our nation's horrible culture of violence. We mayors get the email or the text alerts, and by and large, they're exactly the same thing. Mr. Mayor, I'm sorry to inform you, but last night, in the middle of the night, shots rang out. We arrived at the scene. When we got there, we found a young African-American man laying face down in the middle of the street, 3 shots to the back of the head. There are no witnesses. There are no witnesses. Well, there are witnesses now. We are the ones who are being called on to witness that something is terribly wrong in our beloved land, from sea to shining sea. Last year in New Orleans, 193 of our fellow citizens were murdered, 193 tragic stories of wake and destruction and heartache. The common thread, nearly all victims were young African-American men who were killed by a young African-American man between the ages of 16 and 30. In 88% of the cases, they knew each other. And in almost all of the cases, they were unemployed, had dropped out of school and society too. These victims are flesh and blood. They're real people with faces and names, hopes and dreams. Reuben Brown, shot 11 times. Kendra Glover, the 4th in her family to be killed on the streets of New Orleans. Bobby Jackson, ambushed, shot 15 times. Donovan Duger, shot dead in his front yard while his baby slept nearby. Bobby Battles, shot multiple times by 3 shooters with AK-47s. The names go on and on and on in a relentless drumbeat of death. Calvin Thomas, Kim Thompson, Kenneth Wilson, Cordell Jackson, Travis Thomas, Zachary Carpenter. But this senseless death is not unique to New Orleans, as Mayor Nutter just said. No. Young African-American men are being slaughtered on the streets of our cities. Murder is the wellspring for a river of pain, from the 7th Ward in New Orleans to the tough streets of North Philly, from the south side of Chicago to Edmondson Heights in Baltimore and beyond, covering every corner of this nation in hurt. In 2012, 193 murders in New Orleans, 506 in Chicago, 419 in New York City, 126 in Oakland, 157 in Memphis, 331 in Philadelphia, 113 in St. Louis, 217 in Baltimore, 411 in Detroit, 37 in Camden, 75 in Columbus, 217 in Houston, 289 in Los Angeles, 89 in San Antonio, 57 in Boston, 69 in Miami, 39 in Minneapolis, 88 in our nation's great capital, and a lot more of that where that came from everywhere else in between. On average, 40 people are lost every day on the streets of America, and 40 more today before the clock strikes 12 on Mandolin Bay. 15-year-old Hadia Pendleton, you all know, was killed the week after President Obama's inauguration in Florida, 3 shot dead outside of a nightclub on Saturday night. In New York City in 24 hours, 8 shot, 3 dead. Washington, D.C., Stephen Horsley, David Lee Robinson, 2 teenagers got caught in the middle. San Francisco, 18-year-old Carl Mitchell. Avondale Estates, cab driver Derek Darcelin, shot and killed in a small town outside of Atlanta. The streets are taking a whole generation of mostly young African-American men, a whole generation of promises lost, and we will never know. We will never, never know what might have been. Indeed, my fellow mayors, we have come to a very dark place where even our youngest and our most vulnerable are being taken from us in this terrible grind of violence. In Maryland, 1-year-old Carter Scott was shot and killed. They were looking for his daddy. In Georgia, 14-year-old selling candy on Monday afternoon got shot in the stomach. In Providence, Rhode Island, at a cookout, it ended in gunfire. 14-year-old was hit. In Brooklyn, hit by a stray bullet. A little 11-year-old is likely paralyzed for life. In Chicago, a 6-month-old shot and killed while sleeping in her daddy's lap. And let's go full circle back to my great city, the city of New Orleans. 5-year-old Breonna Allen shot on the porch during her cousin's birthday party, her guts blown out by an AK-47. Kiera Holmes, on the eve of her 2nd birthday, which happened to be Christmas Eve, playing in the courtyard of the C.J. Pete housing development, felled by a bullet. And 2-year-old Jeremy Gallman died in his grandmother's arms while watching a parade. And finally, 8th grader Ricky Summers, shot dead behind an abandoned house. He was found the next day. He still had a school uniform on, KIPP Academy, that was taking him out and up. Ricky's English class had been studying Langston Hughes. They had just finished a poem called A Dream Deferred. It reads, what happens to a dream deferred? Does it dry up like a raisin in the sun, or fester like a sore and then run? Does it stink like rotten meat, or crust and sugar over like syrupy sweet? Maybe it just sags like a heavy load, or does it just explode? Ricky's dreams were dreams not just deferred, they were denied. Their rich potential snuffed up like too many before him. What could have been for him and for us? You see, each violent act, no matter the victim, tears at our soul. Indeed, far after the blood is washed from the sidewalk and the wrecked body is cleaned away, the pain endures and the consequences roll on like mighty thunder. One murder leaves a wide wake of destruction, a long line of innocent victims, the young child who loses a father, a mother whose heart is broken, a family who is left alone, a community who has lost what might have been. And in a downward spiral, violence begets violence. One death causes the other dominoes to fall. The son of today's victim picks up the gun and becomes tomorrow's terrible tragedy. All this death, separated by time, geography, race, sex, and circumstances, are connected. They are all the strange fruit from the same poisonous tree. Indeed, each murder victim lays in a cold mass grave stretching across America, shared by tens of thousands, all casualties of this dreadful culture of violence that we in America have accepted and have ignored for too long. I want you to consider this for me. In the last 31 years, 1980 to 2011, 611,000 people, fellow Americans, were killed on the streets of America. That's more than all of the Americans that we lost in World War I, World War II, Korea, Vietnam, the Persian Gulf War, the war in Iraq, and the war in Afghanistan combined. And the cost is in both blood and treasure. Economists at UC Berkeley estimate that every murder drains $7 million from the community. So let's add it up. 193 murders in New Orleans last year, $1.3 billion lost. In 2000, the FBI put the number at 14,612 murders, a staggering $100 billion lost per year, since 1980, 4.2 trillion gone. Ladies and gentlemen, what a waste. Here is the truth. On this issue of violence, we as a nation have lost our way. Like a vine choking the life from a proud oak, the creeping scourge of violence tightens its grip on our great nation. Unfortunately, now, many months removed from the galvanizing mass murder at Newtown, we as a nation have made little or no progress in the fight against violence. Since that time, 5,000 American citizens have been killed and enveloped in this culture of violence. But usually, you see, the shooting is not at a school or in a movie theater or in a shopping mall. More often, the killing field of choice is the playground, the bus stop, or now in the middle of the street in the middle of the day. The weapon of choice usually is not an assault rifle with a banana clip. More often, it's a plain old handgun held by an angry young man knee-deep in the life, killing behind a petty beef, some money, a bit of drugs, an insult, a bad look, a scuffed shoe. So little needed to take so much. And it doesn't stop there. One murder flows into another. Revenge leads to paybacks. Reprisals lead to retributions, and the drumbeat of death goes on and on and on and on, day after day after day. Day turns into night, night turns into day. The sun falls, the sun rises, and the murder continues. Turning the tide in this is a huge challenge, but it can be done. And our cities, our mayors are being forced to take it on. In New Orleans, we've designed a cutting-edge plan. It's called NOLA for Life. It's tough, it's smart, it's holistic, and it hits the streets, much like Mayor Nutter is trying to do in Philadelphia, and Mayor Emanuel in Chicago, and Mayor Blake in Baltimore. The first step is to stop the shooting. You have to stop the bleeding. You've got to stop the death first. We've raised over $1 million for local service providers. We've beefed up a homicide unit. We've gotten smart with hotspot policing. We've established a new multi-agency gang unit. We've done all of it. But that's not all. We know that prevention and helping our young people and families succeed is the name of the game. As your mama said once, 1 ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. We've doubled the number of summer jobs for youth and created new job training and placement services through partnerships with local business and universities. We've launched Ceasefire New Orleans. We've launched Midnight Basketball to interrupt violence and to connect young men with resources they need. And on NOLA for Life days, hundreds of citizens come together to clean up crime hotspots. We're starting to see the results. In the past 3 months alone, our multi-agency gang unit investigations have led to the indictments of 50 individuals. Last year, overall crime was down. Murder was down 20% from this time last year and 30% compared to 2 years ago. We're turning the tide, and NOLA for Life can become a template for other cities. But here's the real truth. What we're doing and what we've accomplished is really small. It is a drop in the bucket against this tidal wave of trouble that is in our cities and that continues to come our way. Every day, from the smallest of us to the oldest of us, we pledge allegiance to the flag, to the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God. And here's the word, indivisible. Indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Indivisible means one. It means not capable of being divided. A house divided against itself cannot stand. As a nation, when we work together, we cannot fail, and when we do, we can win. So here is the message for today. This is an emergency. It is a major threat to our nation's peace, our security, and our freedom. Preventing murder and stopping violent crime must become a national priority. Those on the ground in New Orleans, in Chicago, in Philadelphia, in all of our cities, we need a real federal and national commitment of resources to stop the shooting and to stop the violence. We are in the fight of our life, and honestly, I feel like the federal government has left us on the battlefield of war without the resources necessary to win this fight. We have to stand together, we mayors, like generals in wartime. We have to tell Congress and the President, this is where we need the surge. So hear this, Mr. President and Congress, the mayors of this nation are not a special interest group. We are the best partners that you will ever have. We are the warriors at the tip of the spear, helping to form this nation into a more perfect union. We are the ones where hope hits the streets. In New Orleans with NOLA for Life, we're aggressively attacking the problem, but simply put, it's going to take more resources to win the fight. Unfortunately, from what I can see all the way down from our little city, the debate in Washington is sadly superficial and it's partisan. The solutions put forth are divorced from the real-world reality on the streets of America's cities. Seems to me that they spend 99% of their time on 2% of the problem. More interested in rehashing divisive old arguments that don't really matter, like Emperor Nero fiddling as Rome burned. What we need on the ground is not a delicately worded piece of feel-good compromise legislation. No. This problem runs deep. It runs wide. Real solutions have got to be bigger and bolder. Congress can act today and actually do something to put the resources on the ground in the fight where they're needed most. We reduce violence by getting on the street. Democrats, Republicans, Congress, President Obama lock hands, find and build what should be common ground, and launch the newly reinvigorated COPS program to provide billions to hire new cops for community policing, just like Vice President Biden talked about the other day and President Clinton did in the 1990s. There is common ground here. Wayne LaPierre of the NRA wants cops in the schools. President Obama wants cops on the street corner. When was the last time the NRA and this President of the United States were one block away from each other? That's called common ground. They should get that done. In the 1990s, the federal government recognized their responsibility to take on the national challenge of violence. But now the well is dry. Federal grants have been slashed some more. The sequester is making it worse. Now, like a deadbeat dad on this issue, the federal government has walked away. No one seems to care, because if they did, and it was a national priority, they would do something about it. How do you know that? How do you know that? I want you to think about something. After September 11th, after that tragic event, we moved heaven and earth to fight terrorism because we were at risk. We found trillions of dollars that we spent prosecuting the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan and giving our soldiers what they needed to protect our freedom. Out of whole cloth, we created the Department of Homeland Security, and we created the TSA and immediately hired 60,000